Hey, Carlsbad. Thanks for joining us on our Carlsbad People, Purpose, and Impact podcast. For the month of July, we're doing something a little bit different. We're actually taking a retroactive look on our top 5 episodes that we've released over these first 2 years of podcasting. Hard to believe it's been 2 years already, but these episodes have been our top producers, so we thought we'd re-release them and share them with you, our audience. And we will be back in August with brand new content, so we hope you enjoy.
Elevating the human experience through music with Carolyn Grant. Carlsbad People, Purpose, and Impact. An essential podcast for those who live, work, visit, and play in Carlsbad.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Carlsbad People, Purpose, and Impact podcast. My name is Bret Schanzenbach. I am the president and CEO of the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce, and I am your host. I'm very pleased to have with me today Carolyn Grant, the executive director of the Museum of Making Music. Carolyn, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I always do a little bit of research on our guests, and even though we've known each other for 2.5 years or so, I did not realize that you came from Guatemala.
Yes, I spent many years in Guatemala. I wasn't born there, but I did move there at a very young age. My father was sadly killed in Vietnam. And so after that, my mother went back and finished her PhD in archaeology.
Oh, very
interesting. And she moved the family down to Guatemala, which is actually her homeland. She was born and raised in Guatemala. So yes, I spent many years there.
And then you made the jump from there. I don't know if this is a direct stop, so there might be stops along the way, but you ended up at the University of Arizona.
Yes, there was a European stop on the way to Arizona, but yes, I did end up at the University of Arizona. Yeah.
And I see now that you're, I'm going to assume fluent, but fluent in Spanish, French, and English.
Yes, I would say at one point in my past, I was fluent in all 3 languages. Right now, I'm a little rusty, especially in French.
Yeah.
And English, English is good. And Spanish, I can converse easily in Spanish, but I probably couldn't talk about the political situation in the world in Spanish, that level.
Sure, yeah. Well, it probably wouldn't take you long, though, to get back to that level once you have it. Oh, that's awesome. And you have been the executive director at the Museum of Making Music since 1998.
I have indeed. Actually, I started at the museum in 1998 working for the founding director, who was Sherry West, now Sherry Freeman, a dear mentor and friend of mine. And then I became executive director, I think in 2001, right in there.
Okay. And that's around the time when the museum itself opened, didn't it? Open in 2000?
We opened to the public in 2000. We opened to the industry of musical products in 1998. So I came on board right after we opened to the industry, but before we opened to the public. So I was involved in the process of getting the museum ready to open to the public, and then I've been there ever since.
Yeah, which is fantastic. So we were talking off mic before we started the podcast about your own band, your trio. So music's obviously been a big part of you. So walk us through that. Walk us through your experience with music that drew you to become involved in the museum to such an extent.
Oh my gosh. How many hours do we have? This is a long story, so you're going to have to guide me at some point. So as a baby, my mother recognized right away that I lit up every time there was any sort of music around me. And so when I was 5 or 6 years old, she decided that I needed to start in music lessons. However, we didn't have a lot of money to afford that. So she took her grocery budget and carved out enough money out of her grocery budget to rent a piano and start me in piano lessons. And so that is how it all began. It is thanks to my mother.
Yeah, and her sacrifices.
Yes, absolutely. And so I took piano for many years and also ballet. The more I could be around music or involved with music, the better. Then I got away from music for a little while in Guatemala. And then when I got back to the University of Arizona, I started off in languages. And then, that I just always had that draw. I've got to play piano for whatever reason. So I started taking private lessons, and my teacher said that I should apply to the music school at University of Arizona. So I did, got accepted. I placed well in the piano performance program and did that for a couple of years, but didn't finish my degree in music. I went back to languages. Long story short, had one career, finished that career, got out of that career, and just said, I have to get back to music. So my whole life has been this in music, away from music, back to music, in, away, back. Until I finally decided that life is pretty short. And if I'm really going to live my passion, I better find a job that connects it all.
Yeah.
And so I spent 3 years going through that soul search, job search kind of thing. And it was very, very difficult. And I happened, there's a very long story behind that, but I'll just jump to the part where I finally wrote a resume with a very clear intention at the top, which was, believe it or not, I would like to work in a museum, preferably about music. And I took it to a temp agency right here in Carlsbad. And I laughed, they laughed, like, where are you going to find that job, right? And 3 months later, almost to the day, they called me and said there was this music museum being built and they were looking for an assistant to the director. And the rest is kind of history. I interviewed, and it was a long, Sherry put me through the whatever you call it, the ringer on the interview, but I did get the job, and I've been there ever since. And so I have been able to marry that my employment with my passion, and that's made all the difference.
So for folks who are listening to this who maybe have actually not been in the museum ever, I think it'd be great for you to kind of share, what the museum does and how, I was privileged not too long ago to come see, the remade museum, which we'll talk about in a bit, but just share with people, what is the real focus and what is the museum all about?
That's such a good question, and I'm very excited to answer this question, but I'm going to start by saying what we're not.
Okay.
So in the world of music museums, there are museums about the history of instruments.
Okay.
We are that to an extent, and we are not that. There are music museums that focus on a particular celebrity. We are not that. There are museums that focus on a particular genre, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, et cetera. We are not that either. So we provide a very specific niche and view onto the world of making music. We are affiliated with a global organization, a trade association known as NAMM, which stands for the National Association of Music Merchants. It is a global organization that supports the makers and manufacturers of instruments, the retailers, distributors, and publishers, so the making and the selling of musical instruments and products. We are affiliated with that side of the music world. Right. So our museum talks about and presents the ecosystem of making music, meaning what goes into providing the tools that musicians, music makers need to express themselves through music. The end result of our work is the music.
Yeah.
But we're the behind the scenes story at looking at tools.
Yeah.
What tools do musicians need? Why do these tools change over time? What are the drivers of change behind instrument development and musical genre development? How do the two impact one another? So our museum is organized in three main themes. Making the instruments is the first gallery. And I can talk more in depth about what's in each gallery later. But the second gallery is providing the instruments. So entrepreneurship, retailing, distribution, how moments in history and our economic history have impacted the sale of musical instruments
Sure.
and the entrepreneur and the creativity that goes into surviving tough times, which is why I love being part of the chamber, because it ties in so closely. And then the third is our third gallery and third area is a video projection and immersion room that drives home this visceral feeling of the power of music once that musician and that instrument connect.
Yeah.
And then what happens when that relationship develops and when that musician decides to share that with the world.
Yeah. That video room was powerful. I mean, having just gone through and had a nice tour from yourself of the new remodel. So you've been open for over 20 years, about 20 years to the public, but before that, even to the industry. But in 2020, when everything was a little off kilter because of the pandemic, you guys were able to maximize that time to your advantage in a sense and do a massive remodel. Share with us about that.
That is the most uncanny timing. So we were planning on closing the museum in August of 2020 anyway. We ended up closing March 13th. So we basically stayed the course. We did speed up a little bit on the construction phase and got that going. But starting in March, we all went remote. We finished up all the design, all the architectural drawings, all of the behind the scenes. Well, not all. A lot of the behind the scenes work. Then a few of us went back on site last August and then watched the demo and reconstruction phase throughout. I think that was pretty much buttoned up in January. The difference where we really felt this extra time maximized, as you say, this extra time was we were going to originally open, we thought about February, then March, then April, and it kept getting pushed back. But what that allowed us to do was test things out and perfect things so that what we would have done, on days where we were closed after we opened to the public to assess and redo a few little things we were able to do before we opened, such as the audio, making sure the audio was working comfortably and correctly throughout the different galleries. So we really used the time to the absolute ultimate.
Yeah. So now let's talk to the folks who had been there before the remodel and had, are familiar with what the museum was. But now, go into one of the exhibits in a little more depth for somebody and talk to them about the new interactive, you just talked about the testing the audio and all that stuff. So tease up a little bit for them if they haven't been back yet, because it just reopened very recently.
Just last week.
Yeah. So tease up for them what they have waiting for them.
Yeah. So I would say as a general comment, what is waiting for them is a broader and deeper experience. There's a lot of information now to explore and a very different method in which to explore it. So what we have are displays of instruments, of course, and then we have touch screens in front of each display. And it is, once you've read the introductory panel on the wall, looked at the display, looked at some of the visuals, and then dive into the touch screen, that's where you dive in to this swimming pool of information.
Yes.
And we have it organized into stories. So there's a number of different stories about whatever theme we're presenting that you can dive into. After the stories, then if you're interested in learning more about a particular artifact, you can press the number of the artifact and up will pop a description of the artifact, who loaned it or donated it to us, the year of the artifact, the history behind it, and then also a close-up photograph of the actual instrument on display so that you can get up close to the instrument front and back. Then we have a watch and listen button where there you can listen to oral histories. For those of you, familiar with the music products industry, you can listen to an interview with Henry Steinway. You can listen to an interview with Chris Martin of Martin Guitars. of Bob Taylor,
Yep.
of our own San Diego's Taylor Guitars,
Yep.
Jamie Deering of Deering Banjos right here in San Diego County. So you really can get to know the people behind these instruments. Then you also can see, I feel like I'm going on and on. There's a lot to explore in each
Yeah.
one of these. But you can also then click on factory footage, and you can watch these instruments being made, both in
Yes.
factories and in small workshops, from guitars to synthesizers to pianos, how they build the frames around those pianos. And cymbals, the cymbal one is just fascinating to see how cymbals are made. All of a sudden, the instruments that you're seeing on the wall take on a whole new meaning, because you meet the person behind that particular instrument. You see how it's made. You see how every single instrument, no matter if it's made in a factory or in a workshop, there's always hand tooling and hand work involved with every instrument.
Yeah.
And then finally, to wrap it all up in a nice bow, is the musical samples. So
Right.
we've chosen all new musical samples throughout the museum. And that's where, you see, okay, and then that's the final result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the hands-on spaces that you have. I think when we got to go through and have a preview of it recently, a couple of things that really jumped out to me was the watching them shape a grand piano. That was just something else, never having even really stopped to think about that before. And then the cymbal, like you mentioned, was very neat as well. Yeah. I told my wife that we need to book like a 3, maybe 4 hour block of time and bring our kids, because there's so much to delve into. It's so rich. It's not something you just blitz through in a half hour.
That's, it's funny you should say that. We've been watching the visitor experience. And I think in the previous iteration of our museum, we were seeing people spend 45 minutes, maybe an hour.
Sure.
Now we actually had a family. We've had a family spend 4 hours in there. Another one spent 3 hours in there. It's a minimum, I'd say, of an hour and a half to 2 hours. There's a diversity of experience now. What? The first couple days, I just spent all day in there watching visitors interact with all this work we've been doing for these years. And I was just so humbled and excited to see these little nooks and crannies. Some people were playing instruments. Some were watching musical clips. Some were looking at factory footage. Others were in the video immersion gallery. Others were on the DJ station. There was just people in all different places having a diverse experience. It was just, I got chills, just maybe even a tear in my eye watching that.
Well, like I said, it's very rich. It's a very rich experience. You have this phrase, I think it's on your website under like maybe your mission or values or something, but it says, I loved this, music and music making are essential elements of the full human experience. I really loved that and resonated with that. All of my children are in music and music makers. But I love that music making as an essential element of the full human experience. So share with us a little bit about that. Why do you think making music is so essential to a full human experience?
Well, I wrote that phrase.
Yeah, I bet you did.
And I struggle trying to put into words an almost unnameable power. So the reason I wrote it that way is because you can have a wonderful human experience and not be involved in music, However, music is a human communication.
Yes.
It is something that has been given to us as a way to fully express what we experience on this earth and in our lives in a way that communicates differently, not better or worse, but it's different from the communication through words, different from visual communication. And in my opinion, being able to experience that level of human connection through the beauty of the musical sound or musical expression is something I wouldn't want anyone to miss out on in this life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's really well said. And I think, music cuts across cultures, and so there's so much we can connect to from music across. It's like it connects us all, and right now I'm enjoying and it's not just right now, it's been going for a trend that's been going for several years, maybe a decade or more, maybe longer, but where within the same song, you'll have artists, mix their different cultural backgrounds. I love that. And so you'll have, part of a song in Spanish and then part in English and or whatever the case might be. Those are beautiful.
I totally agree with you. And that's, in my opinion, that's creating a new expression, And in fact, we have a touchscreen in the museum that's called Global Spotlight. And putting this Global Spotlight screen together, the first intention was to say, okay, well, we'll do a clip of tradition and a clip of innovation. And I said, that's not quite right. It's quite right. So what we did is that we took certain countries and we chose 2 clips, and one is called Echo and one is called Evolution. The Echo clip is a musical expression from that area of the world that goes way back in time and continues to echo in our world today. So that's one clip.
Yes.
The second clip is called Evolution, and that is musical expression in a global community. So that's in a cross-cultural community, something. That clip shows the combination of expressions from different countries. And so if you spend some time in front of that screen, you start to realize it is all one big musical expression. And the more that we cross over and work with one another in creating these new expressions, the richer we become. Never forgetting the echoes of our traditional sounds, preserving those forever, and then bringing seemingly disparate expressions together.
Right.
That to me is the ultimate.
Yeah, that's beautiful. You have a special exhibit section of your museum, and I think we want to mention that right now. I saw, you have tools of synthesis right now. Is that still? No? Oh, that's what the website says. Whoops.
We need to update the website.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to ask me what I was going to do next. Well, next we'll be updating the website.
Yeah.
but I can tell you what's on.
Yeah, tell us what's there right now,
Okay.
and then what might be coming up there soon, and how long those last. And
Sure. So right now we have a special exhibition, and it is called A Moment to Reflect.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, so you've walked through this museum, you've seen factory footage, musical clips, oral histories, instruments. I mean, you have just been submerged in all of this. And so the final stop in this Moment to Reflect gallery is we're asking the visitor to just stop a moment and think about where this desire to express oneself through and using an object, to amplify one's voice through the use of an object, where that goes back to. And so on display are objects of nature, rocks, sticks, bones, and it's just a meditative space for people just to take a moment and kind of bring it all full circle. Today we're a huge global industry, but it all started with that one little human desire to pick up an object and make a sound with it.
Like the 2-year-old banging on a trash can, or
just like that.
Yeah. For sure. And that's wonderful. And so the special exhibits are temporary and then they cycle?
Yes. So they typically are up around 9 months, sometimes 6, sometimes a year, kind of depending on the artifacts that are on display or the theme. And so actually what's coming now that we've got the renovation done and are kind of on the other side of many things, we're going to be putting together our special exhibition schedule.
Calendar.
We've got lots of ideas.
Oh, great.
The problem is it's not a problem, but the challenge is simply to figure out what to do when and in what order. Yeah.
Sure. So for the person who's now inspired and hasn't been there or has been there before, but is hearing all this and wants to come back, easiest way, especially for the newbie, to find you. I mean, we're blessed. You're right here in Carlsbad, but if you don't know where you are, how can they find you?
Go to our website, first of all, museumofmakingmusic.org. Google 5790 Armada Drive. We are right here in Carlsbad, right above the flower fields.
Yeah, between Legoland and the flower fields.
Between Legoland and the flower fields, and on Armada Drive between Karl Strauss and GIA.
Yep.
So it's right on that street.
Yeah, we are very blessed to have you as part of our fabric here in Carlsbad, and it's wonderful. Wonderful. I highly recommend it to everybody out there. I know my first visit was probably just a few months before the renovation started. So, and now, of course, I've got to see it since the remodel and everything. And I can't wait to take my daughter, who was with me the first time. I was describing, the new experience, and she can't wait to come back. And everybody's excited. So we'll be visiting soon, and we look forward to it. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and share your passion for music and to share about everything that's going on.
Thank you so much, Bret, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and do ask for me if you come to the museum. I'd love to meet members of our community.
There you go. Ask for Carolyn Grant, the executive director. She would love to meet you. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on our Carlsbad People, Purpose, and Impact podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please hit the follow button on wherever you get your audio. And please tell a friend. We would love to hear your feedback, which you can share at carlsbadpodcast.com. You can leave us a review, ask a question, or leave an audio comment, which we can play on the show in the future. And that's all we have for today. Can't wait to see you next time on Carlsbad People, Purpose, and Impact. And remember, share some kindness today. It's free, creates goodwill, and makes you feel great.